We'll try to project during this panel. Our main motive is to apprise the audience of the opportunities in Indian defense, aerospace, to some extent aviation and space sector. But before that, I just give you a background of the organization from which all of us are here. Under the banner of CII, we are here. It's a 119 years old industry association, one of the oldest in India, with 7,200 direct membership and around 100,000 indirect membership through 240 affiliated industry associations, which are sectoral associations. We also act as a diplomatic core of Indian industry. You can look at the panel and you can make out that it's a true multicultural representation of the Indian society. The very basics of Indian society is a multiculturalism, and there are foreigners, foreign nationals working for Indian companies, and then the Indian nationals working for the foreign companies. Without taking much of your time, let me just give you some figures about Indian defense sector. There are, everybody knows, there are ample of opportunities. The panelists are going to cover a lot of things in details. I think all of us know that billions of dollars of opportunities lie in Indian defense sector alone. But very few will know that between the period 2002 to 2012, $6.47 billion have been surrendered or probably allocated defense budget remained unspent. So you can imagine the volume of the business one can look at when we talk about India. Another strategic sector is space. Now we are started from the scratch, and India is among top 5, which is basically an achievement, a success story. Indian space sector is a success story. I'll not give you much details about it because I'll prefer most of the panelists to cover most of the points. So Commodore Samaddar will give you the details about opportunities in Indian aerospace sector, both civilian and defense. And Mr. Xavier Hay and Vishwanath Rao would give you their foreign perspectives from the foreign companies. Mr. Luthra is here from India Strategic Magazine, and he's remained in this part of the world for, I think, nearly 20 years. So he's very well aware of the environment here, work environment, work culture. And then Aviation Pande is there, who will give you the perspective from the Indian software company. They are also into data analytics, and they provide customized solutions to different clients. And Mr. Chris Johns from Infotech, one of the leading Indian design engineering company, having operations in several countries and in India as well. So over to Commodore Samaddar.
Good afternoon. Let me begin by thanking Mubadala for organizing this wonderful seminar over the last 2 days. All of us have taken note of valuable inputs that will help us strategize business in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years' time. The India sector has been mentioned more than once on different forums, and it would be nice to just put these thoughts together in one presentation to see what exactly that India has to offer by way of platforms, by way of equipment, by way of the opportunities that investors can look at in building enterprises in India. My short presentation should not take more than 10 minutes, but I'll try and finish earlier if I may, and so then we can have a longer session on discussions. Firstly, there is a government focus on building up the aerospace sector, and this is a directive from the Planning Commission, which is the apex body, which looks at developing India over the long term. The priority sector identified is the aerospace and defense sector, as circled in this graph. Now, what is the aerospace sector? The aircraft manufacturing sector, the allied equipment sector, the services sector, and I've broken it up into various other parts which are shown on the slide in terms of civilian aircraft, in terms of autonomous vehicles, in terms of services. But my focus on today's presentation is mostly on the aircraft manufacturing sector. So where are we on aircraft manufacturing? You look at the entire ecosystem comprising design, manufacturing, and assembly. As far as design is concerned, I would place India somewhere between the high end and top end in terms of capabilities that already exist in India, the kind of services that the design and engineering sector in India is providing to world-renowned OEMs and designing complex systems for them. So far as manufacturing is concerned, we would again be between Tier 2 and Tier 3. We have not yet moved to complicated subsystems and flight control systems, not so much in load-bearing structures, but we are getting there. And there is now a substantial amount of investment made by Indian private sector in those sectors to supplement the efforts of the DPSUs. In assembly, I think this is where we really need to look at. At the moment, there is no assembly in the private sector at all. Only Mahindras would be making the first move in doing an assembly of an aircraft in the private sector. But really, there is no final assembly and integration facility in the private sector as of now. And and all these things where the gaps exist, there are actually opportunities for smart investors and OEMs across the world to look at these particular segments where investments can reach very productive results and good profits. So very quickly, I just want to show you a quick slides on what has been happening here. These are all the contracts that have landed in the last, let's say, 6 to 7 years. That's about $72 billion. Where some contracts and short finals, that's about $32 billion, mostly from the basic trainer, the MMRCA, the attack helicopters, naval MRH, Airbus, the Super Sukhois have just been maybe signed, but you're now looking at $32 billion of new platforms coming in very, very soon. Some larger contracts on approach is a multi-mission maritime aircraft for the Coast Guard, maybe 19 of them, designed in collaboration with the Center for Airborne Studies, the medium-range maritime reconnaissance aircraft, the carrier-based airborne early warning and control systems, amphibian aircraft, the IJT, 85 of them, AVAX, and the medium transport aircraft 56, for which an RFP has already been issued and it's being progressed. That's another $20 to $22 billion worth of aircrafts. The UAV segment is also pretty active, and that amounts to almost $5 to $8 billion of new projects and acquisitions that need to come in. Other aircrafts in the helicopter segment, I put them down here. The total helicopter requirement could be up to 700 helicopters in the next 10 to 12 years, and this is just the replacement market, so which is amounting to about $20 billion. And these helicopters range from 2-ton helicopters to sub 10 tons, or to 10-ton helicopters across the three services. Together with the BSF, the paramilitary forces, this number can be much larger. But roughly, this is the magnitude of the orders that we have. As far as the commercial sector is concerned, I think we have had a substantial amount of deliberation on what the commercial sector in the Asia-Pacific region is going to be like. But particularly for India, there's a Boeing report which talks about 1,600 aircraft worth another $200 billion. Interestingly, those of you who might know the private jets in India, as India is the largest market in Asia for private jets, we occupy 12% of the global market for private jets in India. High net worth individuals in India have the largest number of private jets in Asia. There's about 600 to 800 helicopters requirement in the next 2 decades for various sectors, whether it is offshore oil installations, tourism, travel, island servicing, so many other things. Again, a sizable amount, 600 to 800 helicopters in the civilian sector. But unfortunately, India is still the only country among the BRICS that does not have an ongoing civil aircraft program, and that is one of the areas that has a lot of potential for investors from the Emirates to look at, OEMs to look at in joining together for the Indian RTA program. I'll speak about it after this, in the end of this presentation. It just shows to you, this is the sort of segmentation, growing private jets and helicopters over the next 10 years. Market leaders are shown on the slide. So whilst this may be all the challenge, the opportunities, there are substantial challenges in working in India. And not all of them are easy to overcome. There's a complex maze of the Indian aerospace industry, and I think this is very fair to put all these perspectives together. So business models are designed considering all these factors so that you don't reach frustration early. Patience and perseverance pays in India. It's the long haul game, but it is important for investors and OEMs to recognize the environment in which that investment will bear fruit. And I put down some points here. Of course, the acquisition process in India, as far as the MOD is concerned, is a snakes and ladder game. You never know when will you get a boost up and when will you be, sliding down some difficult terrain. Offsets is a new animal. It all depends who's looking at offsets and what perspectives. So it's quite a challenge, and any investors who look at Indian opportunities in the Indian aerospace segment must clearly understand that offsets cannot be treated as obligations. They are actually opportunities for OEMs, and that's how you can actually work the offsets to your advantage to bring up your own global supply chain to really very competitive standards. The other issue is that exports are very closely governed by Indian rules of arms export, quite in alignment with international standards. So therefore, you need to understand how could you bring in your supply chain, your vendors into the export loop as part of your overall strategy for locating production in India, locating manufacturing in India. Taxation is a huge matter, and I think those of you who've been following taxation matters in India would be quite daunted by the enormity of the problem. But I think, and I'm quite optimistic on this, that once the new government comes in, we'll have the GST and the direct tax code in place very soon, and that will sort out much of these issues of taxation matters. And I think lessons have been learned from the recent past, and the bad phase of taxation-related question marks is now behind us. The next point is about FDI. Now, on FDI, there is a policy which governs it to 26%. It was recently revised to a case-by-case basis for much higher percentages of FDI, depending on whether you're able to build production capacity in the country, whether you're going to build the technical capability in terms of HR capital being developed, and ultimately, how can you build a sustainable business case based on the FDI limits that exist in partnership with an Indian company to form joint ventures or subcontracting agreements as you might want to do. Some challenges in entry considerations. Most important point, I'll just flag a few here, is sustainability. I mean, companies who come into India have to be there for the long run, and you have to have the perseverance and patience to play that game for the long run, because the market is high, market is large, the access is a little difficult, but once you're in it, it can really reap you good dividends. Now, I must say here that in the recent past, we have had practically every aviation major in the world setting up an office in India. Every aviation major, whether it's Bombardier, whether it's Boeing, whether it's Airbus, whether it's GE, Pratt & Whitney, everybody is in India. And they have come there after very deliberate discussions and after their boards and the shareholders have given them their approvals. But it is a consideration. It cannot be expected to be business as usual, where you can look at an aerospace company delivering quarter-on-quarter results. That's not going to happen. So some of the other points I put here, which you could look through. So out of all these things, out of this clutter, we need to find simplicity. From the discord, we need to find harmony. And in all the middle of this, we need to find opportunity. Where are our immediate opportunities? First is the IF medium transport aircraft. It's an Air Force project, 56, maybe worth $3 billion. An RFP is out. The MOD requirements here. Here again, there's opportunity for OEMs to look at this opportunity of $3 billion straight away. So, I mean, $3 billion now. There'll be a repeat order of another 28, and there will be a substantial order, another for 56. And the Air Force, in this particular case, has also agreed for exports out of India to service a larger market. The second opportunity is in terms of naval multi-role helicopters. That's a project worth $12 billion. And I hope that Airbus Helicopters will win this one and build a facility in India to provide these 126 helicopters. It will be a large order at $10 to $12 billion at a minimum. The present position is that it might go up as a buy and make Indian project, which is what the discussion has been with Indian industry and naval headquarters. Let's see how that plays out. So that's another $10 to $12 billion. In the commercial space is the regional transport aircraft, which is with the National Aeronautical Laboratory. This is a silent project, and this is where many aerospace companies can start coming in, because you can be an OEM to this project by investing and offering parts, assemblies, components, systems, whatever, into this huge project of 70 to 9-seater aircraft, stretchable, as they call it. So it's a large project, almost 8,000 crores, which is like $600 million, $800 million, something like that. In summary then, there's a large market, as I said, and unlike many other markets, the important feature of the Indian market, it is driven by high domestic demand. And here when I talk about high domestic demand, I'm not talking just about platforms, but also all the things that go into platforms, whether it's radars, communication sets, there are landing gear, MROs for wheels and brakes, MROs for aircraft maintenance, periodic repairs, hell of a lot of equipment, including parts, components, and supplies and systems that can go into these aircrafts. So don't just look at the platform, please look at all the other things that go into those platforms to make them fly better. So that's pretty important as far as the major driver is concerned. The challenges I've basically spoken about. As far as the Indian environment is concerned, there is a greater emphasis for buy and make Indian projects as the policy of the government. So there would be more prime contractors who will be Indian companies, and they will have to partner with foreign companies to make those products in India. Some will come fly away, some will be built in India, but there is definitely a thrust towards building and manufacturing in India on these bases. So I've put that down there. In the intervening period for existing contracts, please use the offsets as opportunities to develop your own business. Some of the other principles I put down here, I think I will probably finish here with some last concluding remarks. The basic points that I want to say here is that India is not just about platforms. It's also about the huge amount of opportunities that the aerospace segment has downstream effects on society in general, and on other platforms, whether it is radars, whether it is high-end communication systems, or it's weapon systems. In fact, there is also a concerted effort by the Indian Air Force to localize aircraft MR SAMs and other SAM systems through an Indian manufacturer in India. That can be done. Okay. So before we all have to run away, I'll conclude my presentation here. Thank you very much for your time.
Now, can I invite Mr. Xavier Hay to give his perspective of how he has felt in India, and then his own experience in India, doing business in India.
Yes, Commodore Sujeet could already give a very comprehensive outlook on the helicopter market, but clearly this is just to give an experience and to share with you some feeling about India. Basically, Airbus Helicopters is fully part of Airbus Group as a major leader of helicopter manufacturing worldwide, but also in India, I think that you need to keep in mind to invest over the time with a long-term perspective, to be patient because it's a challenging market, as it was described, on the slides, but you can harvest fantastic potential, in terms of new perspectives, both in military side and civil. For us, we started cooperation with India 50 years ago with Hindustan Aeronautics, producing under license all the Altair families, and reaching so far now 600 units. So you can see that over this period of time, you need really to build confidence, transfer of technology, which is a must, but also opportunities in order to share, the innovation and also some expertise, in Europe or North America. and it really gives you the opportunity to have the backbone, you know, of aviation industry for helicopters, which was the case for us for light helicopters. Let's see what the future will bring us, but you could see the perspectives for the new programs. There is a huge requirement and interest shown in replacement of aging platforms. And basically, now all the competition is there, as you correctly mentioned, opening subsidiaries. Airbus Helicopter was the first OEM to open a full setup in India 3 years back, in order to lead and to find some partnership for these new programs. But beyond that, I would say that the prime focus of Airbus Helicopters in India is also to cover the fantastic potential domestic market. And when you can see that in civil aviation for helicopters in India, it's still a kind of a sleeping giant, because you have in India less than 300 helicopters, civil and parapublic. Just for comparison, Switzerland has more helicopters than all over India. And when you can see that last year the worldwide market for civil and parapublic heli market represented 1,000 helicopters, and for the past 7 years 6,000 helicopters, clearly the potential is there. And with the growth of the economy in India, this will be really the new emerging market in Asia after China, but China is already on. For the next decade, and we can hope that it will be by thousands the number of helicopters which will be flying in India. It was also described very correctly that in India you need to face daily some complex environment with regulations, infrastructure, but basically with a very good partnership and good understanding with the authorities, you can really overcome all these constraints in order really to build a very good partnership. So for us as international and global OEM, because we have now more than 30 ventures or subsidiaries worldwide for Airbus Helicopters, and we have more or less for civil and parapublic 46% of the world market with 12,000 helicopters. Really for India, it was our path in order to really to build up our future for both civil and parapublic. So Airbus Group now is also very strong, has a very strong footprint there, with more than 3,000 people working for all the global supply chain of Airbus Group, and we are fully part of this Airbus Group. Dedicated for engineering services, a bit less than 300, and a workforce in total, for including the corporate, 400 people in India. So clearly for us and for our strategy, just the panel before ours could mention the new trends, you know, in Asia, but clearly India is also part of our full strategy, and especially for helicopters, in order to develop this market.
As per a CI report, 1 million jobs can be created in defense and aerospace sector alone. How many jobs are you planning to create in India?
Already, as I just outlined, already with all the vendors and the supply chain for Airbus Group, and not only helicopters, it's 3,000 or so people. But of course, you can imagine that such a massive program, like any single military helicopter programs award, will first of all lead us to find some industrial partnership or industrial setup, manufacturing, MRO activities. So really with these industrial footprints, you will drastically and dramatically develop the workforce by several hundreds. So far, it's a bit premature, I would say, depending on the programs, but clearly only for the small setup for the civil and parapublic of Airbus Helicopters in India. We are 35 people, but in a couple of years we really foresee to double the staffing only for the commercial and support activities.
Okay. So, AVM Pande, would you like to apprise the audience about your plans in India?
Yeah, thank you so much. I will not dwell much upon the opportunities because they were already covered very well in the presentation. The opportunities in India are tremendous, and we do consider aerospace as a sunrise industry. Few points, the focus of the whole, all the OEMs is shifting towards India because of certain factors. One of them is, of course, the budget constraints in the European countries and the sequestration measures that have been taken. But we have also the advantage, and the advantage is that of the demographic balance is in our favor. Secondly, India boasts about a large community of trained engineers and knowledgeable people. Apart from that, the government is also trying to streamline the procedures for the procurement. But one biggest advantage that we have is we are the market leaders in the IT industry and IT-enabled services. One more comment that I would like to make here is over the last 2 years, we have been hearing about a lot of things about the aerospace and how aerospace is going to vitalize this industry. Aerospace, to my mind, is not only manufacturing, design development and manufacturing of airframes, components and aerostructures. But along with the D&D of and manufacturing of the airframe comes the maintenance and operations, maintenance operations, the maintenance information systems, the embedded components, training, simulation, publications, documentations, supply chain, warehousing, and the whole works. If the other areas which are not, if they are not looked into with diligence, the aerospace industry will not survive. I mean, it will not progress at a faster pace. I won't say it will not survive. So what is required is the IT and IT-enabled services, and we know how the landscape of IT has changed over a period of time. From desktops, we have to move towards the smartphones. From the static ERP-based solutions, we will have to move towards the mobile solutions. We'll have to create different platforms for hosting your MIS, your MRO solutions, the engineering services. And for that matter, the IT which is moving towards the SMAC, that is the clouds, analytics, mobility, and collaboration. If we use these tools cleverly and intelligently, I think we can increase the efficiency of operations of the aerospace industry to a great extent. I belong to a company called Persistent Systems, where we specialize into these activities. We have the PLM solutions, which go into production, design development. We have the solutions for data migration, data warehousing. And actually speaking, if you ask, again, my personal opinion, all these days the data was important because aerospace, every sortie generates a large amount of data. Every activity in aerospace generates data, but this data has not provided us meaningful decision points. Basically because at that point of time, the technology was not there. Today we have a technology. Today we have the processing powers. Today we have analytical tools. If we make use of these analytic tools, if we make use of the platforms that are available, if we make software as service, infrastructure as service, and build up our private clouds for managing this information, which is totally unstructured information. It needs to be put into structured form and then used for decision making. We possibly will have more and more efficient aerospace organizations. We'll have the lean manufacturing. We'll have better use of our production facilities, and also the better efficiencies. That's all. Thank you so much.
So would you also like to throw some light on, you were ACS plants maintenance and responsible for the maintenance of 750 aircrafts when you were in Indian Air Force. So would you like to throw some light on the opportunities there for the industry, global as well as domestic?
Yeah, the couple of slides which were shown by Sujeet showed what are the opportunities that are lying, major inductions that are going to be there. Indian Air Force is also going through major modernization transformation, and we are Indian Air Force is acquiring the medium multi-role combat aircraft. There are certain acquisitions of the transport fleet. There are acquisitions of medium and heavy load helicopters. There are acquisitions pertaining to MRSAMs, SAMs, and various other things. And apart from that, we also believe in getting the complete supports from the OEM. Parallelly, the first and second line servicing, what we call that operator level servicing, is done by the Air Force itself, whereas third and fourth line servicing will be either through DPSU or through the OEM. But the latest Defense Procurement Policy 2013, which was issued in July last year, the government is providing a level playing field to the OEM and also along with the defense public sector units like HAL, Hindustan Aeronautics, or the Bharat Electronics Limited. So there is equal opportunity available with OEM. And there are a large number of medium and small and medium enterprises which are available in India who can be your reliable and trusted Indian offset partner. The requirements, the desired characteristics for an Indian offset partner are all listed in the Defense Procurement Policy. So if you have a good Indian offset partner, possibly the OEM can exercise and can operate very comfortably and take part in all these acquisitions.
So Chris, would you like to tell us about Infotech and your global experiences and now working with the Indian company?
Yeah, I've been 14 years in the aerospace industry. 12 of those years were with GKN as a Tier 1, during which time I brought Infotech into my business as an offshore engineering supply partner. And found the experience so enjoyable that when they offered me to join them last year, it wasn't a real challenge for me to say yes. I think on behalf of the CII, it's incumbent on me to say that there are some myths around engineering in India. That Indian engineering is capable of 2D to 3D conversion, tech pubs, very simple engineering process. That's far from true. I mean, I work in a business with 3,000 aerospace engineers, 12,000 engineers across a whole bunch of verticals. One of our biggest customers, we do $100 million a year of engineering business with, is a customer for whom we filed 22 patents. The business with them has grown considerably on the back of the innovation, the creativity, the capability that we bring to them as an organization. We have a substantial presence close to a lot of our customers, and that presence is not so much a volume presence, because we do use cost arbitrage as a tool to support customers and to help them to stretch their budget to get more value for money. But similarly, we will accept as an organization much more responsibility. We have high-level, very experienced engineers in the business, and that's, I'm not wishing to undersell my organization, but I don't think we're unique in that. So the ability to use Indian engineering organizations to support your business is there. We have a very broad range of customers from the OEs, from Airbus, Airbus Military, Boeing, across the whole of the UTC organization, through Tier 1s like GKN, down into lower level organizations across MRO, in avionics, in systems. So the breadth of capability that exists is significant. And the opportunity, I think, for any organization to exploit that and to create partnerships, develop relationships with Indian businesses, Infotech especially, is significant and not to be scoffed at. And don't dispel Indian engineering in the way that a lot of people have when I've talked to them, that there is an assumption that it's a low-level activity. It's very, very far from that.
So India is a pool of, say, it's a second largest pool of doctors and engineers. So we contribute more engineers and doctors than anybody else, any other country else. So how many?
And it's important also to recognise that it's not all green engineers. I mean, engineering, aerospace engineering, has been around for a long time. As I said, I've worked with Infotech for sort of 12 years, so there are engineers today that are still in the business that were perhaps greenhorns 12 years ago. They're now quite experienced engineers. There are engineers that were working 10, 15, 20 years ago in the business. So there is a breadth of capability to support that depth.
So, Mr. Luthra, would you like to share your views?
Yeah, I would like to say that India is a huge market for the simple reason that in the past many years, we just refused to grow. You know, India as a policy would not even export a rifle. But gradually you have neighbors, you have their compulsions, you get into wars even if you are peaceful, and we started realizing that we got to do something. We did a study. I belong to a magazine on strategic and defense and aviation, and we did a study in 2011. And our thinking is, which has been corroborated by my friends in the Indian Ministry of Defense, that India is a market worth about $300 billion, let's say between 2011 and 2025. Now, it's not that we are ambitious in terms of projecting ourselves as a big power. Frankly speaking, everything we have is old, Soviet vintage, acquired in 60s, 70s. You look at our Air Force, the only modern aircraft we have are Su-30s, and hopefully the French Rafale we are going to buy. Every other aircraft is old. And I would say over the last 3-4 years, there have been some substantial deals. Boeing has got about $8 to $10 billion worth of orders. The engine makers, Rolls-Royce and others, of course, ride along with them. Russians have got orders for more Su-30s, 80 Me-17 V5 helicopters, and so on and so on. But we need, as I said, we need everything in land, air, naval, and subsea systems. The $300 billion, it's a huge market. The only condition is we are hungry for technology. Please come there, don't sell. Come there as a partner. And I must also say, we have learned a lot from UAE. I had come here in '95, and we had our then Secretary of Defense Production had come to UAE to attend the IDEX '95. And they learned how UAE is using offsets. And this is probably the same model which we have adopted today, thanks to you friends. 30%, excuse me, 30% minimum, 50% in some cases, in the cases of major aircraft deals and so on. But then everything is required. Come over, welcome. You heard Commodore Samaddar. He is representing ShinMaywa. I think we are going to buy about 20 odd aircraft. Only 2 will be bought two will be flown. The rest would all be assembled, then made in India. And this is true for every system. Yeah. Thank you.
So, Vishwanath, would you like to speak about your experiences?
Yeah. Good evening. My name is Vishwanath. I work for an American company called Altair. We are one of the leading technology companies in the space of computer-aided design, computer-aided engineering. I've been fortunate enough to be working for this company for 15 years, and in the process have worked with many aerospace companies who have set up technology centers back in India and South Asia. So my experience is very similar to what Chris just mentioned. There is a myth that all the engineering community in India is primarily working based on instructions, but it is far from reality. I have seen this industry progress from doing work based on instructions to value-added work to taking up complete programs. I work very closely with the GE in Bangalore, and I know they take up complete engine programs which are running out of their technology center in Bangalore. Okay, Altair's role in this whole journey has been to kind of disperse the information that we have or what we have learned from the developed world. Our experience of working with Airbus, Boeing, Pratt & Whitney, GE, Honeywell, Safran, many other companies across the globe, kind of taking that knowledge back to India and propelling the growth of the engineering community in India. I just want to quickly touch upon one area where I think we are pioneering the cause. The area would be specifically in the area of minimum weight design, light weighting or minimum weight design, which is very critical to the aerospace industry. So Altair came up with a new technology called OptiStruct, which is primarily used at the conceptual stage of any product design, and you can come up with the lightest possible design right at the beginning of your design process, and that helps considerably cut down your design cycle time as well as come up with the minimum weight design. Okay, this is also a big enabler to ALM, the additive layer manufacturing technique, because the designs that our technology throws out is primarily a free-form design with no constraints on manufacturing. So if you really want to go for a ALM kind of manufacturing technique, our technology would be the backbone to arrive at those optimized designs. And we're trying our best to propagate this technology to as many Indian companies as possible. We work closely with all the technology centers and also the domestic aircraft manufacturers in India like HAL, NAL, ADA, ADE, and all the other DRDO labs. So that's my perspective.
Okay, so
I just want to mention one more thing. The Indian system is slow, but somebody triggers us definitely. Now, of course, we are conscious that we now got to do it by ourselves. Between 89, 90 till about 98, we didn't buy anything. Then we had Kargil war because our neighbors occupied parts in Kashmir. Again, we stopped. We did something, we stopped again. Then we had 26/11 in 98 when we had terror attacks in Bombay. That was in November. In January 2009, the Prime Minister himself called for files on Navy. That's how Boeing was cleared. So somebody will always kickstart us even if we don't want to. And we are big buyers. Thank you.
yeah, so do you have any plans to set up a center of excellence or expand?
We already have a fairly large presence in India. Altair is not a very big company. We are about $300 million in revenue, approximately about 1,500 employees, so we are not a very large company. Out of the 1,500 employees that we have globally, 600 of them are in India, so that's almost more than 1/3 of Altair's employee strength. And we have a development center back in Bangalore, and we also do product design consulting services to enable our customers to implement our technology into their processes. So that's primarily what we are doing. So to answer your question, we already have a fairly large setup by our standards, I would say.
So now let's talk about some of the constraints which Indian industry as well as the foreign companies face in India. Primarily transfer of technology, FDI, offsets, taxation regime, and several other issues. So I'll request Commodore Samaddar to...
I think it's not only India, but I think any new country that an OEM wants to commit investment in will have to learn to live within the ecosystem that that country operates in. So India will not be completely unique in the degree of difficulty that it has of doing business there. And of course, we have very strong legal systems. There are very good systems of IP. There's a bit of unpredictability in terms of timelines when contracts will get done. But the entire process is so transparent and fair in the overall evaluation. So I would think that all the negatives may be on one side, but the positives of a fair and transparent process, of adequate due diligence being done in the overall acquisition programs in the military sector is something that should give confidence to OEMs and investors who are coming into India. The legal process is good, the support systems are good. Apart from that, as I mentioned earlier, we are now moving to a new tax regime, and that should come in once the new government is in place in a year or so. And once that comes in, you would get much more clarity on taxation issues. On compliance issues, there is various matters that need to be, that are sort of in conformance with international law. There are double taxation avoidance agreements. There are issues about customs and duties exemptions, non-tax barriers, and so on and so forth, which are all in conformance with international law. So to that extent, the Indian ecosystem is improving by the day, and I'm certain by the time in a year or so when the new government comes in, and whichever government it is, we'll have to push these projects, because some of these projects are really old. And as I mentioned was made, many of these projects are actually replacement item projects. They're not to build new capacity. They're only replacing obsolete items, as been mentioned by a panelist earlier. So net, I would still say that domestic demand in India is a sufficient incentives for OEMs to come in, particularly when you look at consolidation. An example can be aircraft engines. When I showed you a slide about transport aircraft, and if the government makes a choice of just following a particular engine manufacturer, the total aggregates may be more than 1,200 engines. That's a huge number. And for 1,200 engines, you have to create the entire supporting structure of MROs and test benches and what have you. That's a fairly good return on an investment to service such a large item. The other case can be helicopter rotor blades. I mean, you're looking at 700 to 800 helicopters in the military sector, and maybe 700 to 800 in the commercial sector, all in the next 15 years. That's like a hell of a lot of rotor blades, and it is possible for OEMs to consider setting up plants in India to just address the rotor blade market itself. That would give you the sort of economies of scale that you want, just to be sustainable in the Indian. Just to meet the Indian domestic demand.
So before we throw this house open for the questions, Xavier and probably Vishwanath, would you like to tell us about the comfortability or how comfortable foreign OEMs are with the concept of indigenization and self-reliance in India?
Actually, I fully share a point of view of Commander Sujeet, because it was our strategy and vision, clearly in order to anticipate the emergence of this domestic market. And clearly our experience is really positive in India, because the partnership is really a long-standing partnership. We were talking about industrial aeronautics for military side, but also for, it was mentioned also in one slide, about Dolphin helicopter with Powerlance, which is largest oil and gas operator for helicopters. We've got now 30 years of cooperation with them, developing MRO activities, and clearly a partnership in India is for a long and in very faithful and really friendly atmosphere. So I think that it's really an incentive to come to India in order to, okay, it's a long-term perspective, long-term investment, but it pays off, and it's really worth it in terms of potential.
I'll just say 3 words. Actually, when you want to operate in India, you need to have partnership, perseverance, and patience. If you maintain all these 3, then possibly India is the best place to work. Thank you.
Vishwanath, would you like to?
Okay, for Altair per se, India is very strategic, just like the way it is for most other technology companies in the world. We took the first step to set up a development center in Bangalore, probably way back in 98, 99, so it's been like 15 years. And we do 10% of our global business in India. That's significantly high compared to most other technology companies in the world. If you look at a typical standard for any technology company, it's not more than 2 to 3%. But for Altair, 10% of our business globally comes from India and the South Asian market. So that's significantly higher. So that shows that we're extremely comfortable and very happy doing business in India.
Okay, so the bottom line is that you have to come to India and make India your home. Graduate from buyer-seller relationship to become an Indian company, set up your manufacturing plants, set up your R&D bases in India, and I think India is the very promising market for all the global players. So now may I request the audience to raise some questions if you have any.
Nadeem Selbach from Abu Dhabi Aviation. Just a quick question, and it's a bit rotary focused, so I apologize for that. It's just the first panel where there's been someone on the rotary side that I could ask. How do you see the global demand for next generation aircraft compared to the OEM's production? Because it doesn't appear to me that it's keeping up.
For military or civil side?
I would say both, but I'm thinking more of offshore oil and gas, so on the civil side.
Clearly, you're perfectly right, because it was mentioned partly in the slides describing, the different military programs for helicopters. You have some, let's say, open tenders and open requirements, and in parallel, a bit like a mirror effect, you have also some programs mainly focusing on the domestic industry. And clearly, I think that we can even look at this LUH, the DROOV, from Hindustan Aeronautics. You had a support from OEMs from all over the world, supporting this indigenous program. So I think that we can find a place also in the indigenous program. This was for military. For the civil side, clearly, I think that the international OEMs are still one step ahead. I would say in terms of technology, you were talking about oil and gas. Of course, all the major players, we are there to propose the latest technology in terms of production or a crew change for the operations of the only few operators, because there are only 4 majors. And yes, you have same Hindustan Aeronautics producing civil helicopters, but usually they are selected or acquired by this civil market. I would not say by default, but as a backup solution, and primarily they go for American or European manufacturers. And I think, we still have more or less 75 helicopters in India flying for oil and gas. You can see the potential with the growth of the fields in deep water range. So there is a big potential for international OEMs, yes.
The expansion you were describing is just from 300 helicopters to 2,000. That seems difficult for anyone to keep up with. So, I'm hearing the same things about a lot of markets, and particularly in India, the growth potential is massive, and the infrastructure required to sustain the growth it seems to be part of what has been discussed today. And it seems like people are moving in, but I wasn't sure if you felt like it was happening fast enough.
You're right, because for the last 3 years, the market was more or less, I would not say flat, but the increase was very moderate due to new regulations and new requirements of some safety equipment. So for aging platforms, some operators, they preferred, to sell the helicopter rather than retrofitting them. But it's just a matter of fact, and this will be overcome. Clearly, when you see that in India you have no air-balance system, and over the past 7 years, for instance, worldwide, the HAMS, what we call Air Medical Service, was representing 900 helicopters for 4 billion euro. So you can see the potential, and it does not exist simply in India. Police helicopter, police, they don't have helicopters. They borrow from time to time, from military, but there is no public security choppers so far. And again, if you take public security, it's more than 1,000 helicopters over the past 7 years worldwide, I talk, 7 billion euro. If you take also oil and gas, it's a massive requirement worldwide. Again, you are talking about several, almost a bit less than 1,000 helicopters. It's 9 billion euro worldwide over the same period of time. So yes, it looks to be, even on a daily basis, it's quite challenging for the team, to try to anticipate and to forecast massive sales. But we will, when it comes, clearly India will be really a new giant. I would say that for the civil market, it's still a bit a kind of sleeping giant. But when it comes, it will be really massive.
Thank you very much.
All right, I think we're running short of time, so I would like to thank Mubadala and the organizers here to give us the opportunity to present Indian industry's view here. India is and this is my request to all the audience, that if you have any business in India or any intent of doing business in India, you can approach CII, Confederation of Indian Industry. We'll be more than happy to assist you. Thank you very much, panelists also. So may I request you to give a big hand to all the panelists.